Good evening, everyone. Evening to those in the gallery and to all our staff and councillors this evening. Welcome to the Agenda Forum for Wednesday, 7th of August 2024. Declare the meeting open at 6 p.m. Just like to start with our acknowledgement of country. The City of Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this region, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. And we pay our respects to elders past and present and their descendants. I'd also just like to read out the disclaimer that the terms and conditions of entry into this meeting are posted at the entry of the public gallery, and members of the public are advised to read them prior to attending this meeting and abide by them, please. Tonight's attendance apologies. We have Councillor Prodovnik from the Midland Guildford Ward zooming in electronically. Can you hear us there, Councillor Prodovnik? Thank you. And we also have one of our staff members, Mr. Stephen Jacquina, also joining us, Stephen. And we have no leave of absence, but we have apologies from Councillor Aringo and Councillor Singh this evening. And we also have some declarations of financial and proximity interests and interests affecting impartiality. Mr. Stephen Kane, the CEO, declared a direct financial interest in item 16.1, which is the CEO Performance Review 2024, as it relates to his annual performance review, remuneration and future performance targets. We also had one from Councillor Henderson on 14.3.6, which is an impartiality declaration, as his wife made a submission, and also from Councillor Dawn, also an impartiality as a submission was also made. If councillors have any other declarations?
Madam Mayor, does my declaration of interest carry over from the CEO Performance Review panel, or do I have to declare it again? So I'll declare it in partiality interest, as I was one of the 11 councillors that submitted the response to the CEO Performance Review.
Thank you. At this point, Mr. CEO, it's not covered.
Through the Chair, it's not actually necessary for you to make a declaration of impartiality, as the obligation was for you to complete the review process, but it's still open to a council member to do so.
I'll be declaring it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So if anyone does have one, please pass it up to the CEO. There's some in your drawer underneath the desk there. And we have nil petitions this evening and reports and notices of motion. 6.1 is additional information from officers. We have none there. We have 14.3.6, which is the proposed Brabham Stage 3 Local Structure Plan, which is lot 822 Yaldine Road, Brabham. That was the additional information, as there was an error found on page 110 of the report, which has been corrected below. So then we move to 6.2, which is our deputations. I know we've got quite a bit this evening, and we're very grateful for everyone coming in and travelling in tonight in this wintry weather. And so we start with, I'll just begin with, in accordance with the current procedures for public participation at the agenda forums, all requests for in-person deputations were required by 5 p.m. on Tuesday the 6th of August 2024, and all written deputations were received by 3 p.m. on Tuesday the 6th of August 2024, and they were circulated with the preliminary agenda on Tuesday evening. We've got 14.3.4, consideration of submissions, and that's the amendment number 223 to local planning scheme number 17. And that's to modify the land uses allowed in precinct number 2 of the Rosehill Waters Special Use Zone number 24, South Guildford, LPS 17-223, and that's found on page 44. So tonight we have a written deputation from Dr. Steve Boswell, not in support of the officer's recommendation. And if you're here, Dr. Boswell, you have 3 minutes. Oh, so that was the written one, my apologies, which is included. So we have 14.3.5, the proposed change of use from 6 grouped dwellings to use not listed, and that's a private psychiatric hostel, and that's lot number 10, number 40 at John Street, Midland, and the DA is 324-24. So the in-person deputations are Mr. Mark Aronson, who's an architect, in support of the officer's recommendation. Mr. Aronson, if you'd like to come up to the lectern. Thank you. If you just turn the speaker on, and you'll have 3 minutes, and I'll just give you a little reminder when you have a minute to go.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So my name is Mark Aronson. I'm an architect. I'm also resident of Boyer, which is just on from Bellevue, and I represent Roshana Group on several other projects. So I'm attending today in support of the change of use application for number 40 John Street. So whilst with this particular project, I'm not the architect on the project, I've worked with Roshana Group on various aged care projects throughout Perth since 2018. And we've recently completed an 80-bed facility for the group in Kalamunda. So I appreciate Roshana and their business ethos, in providing care for the elderly, including people with dementia, together with younger people who are dealing with mental health issues. And I understand that Roshana's project manager is Dinu Ekanayaki, who is here and available to respond to any specific operations issues. And also Dr. Narlin, who's the Roshana representative on mental health, who's fully across the specific details of the management of this particular John Street project. So I'm also the architect of the facility, which is owned and operated by Roshana in Duncan Street, Victoria Park, from which the residents which are proposed to be relocated here in Midland, it's the subject property. So I know the project quite well. It's been operating for 20 years in Victoria Park. It's just opposite Ursula Frayne College along Shepperton Road. Having been involved in that site for quite a long time, I'm not aware of any significant problems with the current use in Victoria Park, and I've not personally witnessed any issues on that location. So I have asked Roshana to provide detail of police call-outs for council to illustrate the level of disruption associated with that. And the feedback I get is that in 2023, there were no police attendance required in Victoria Park, and on a 3-year moving average, police attended 1 time per year. So I also wanted to draw attention to the demographics of the resident with the facilities. They are handpicked by the Roshana Group and the cohort levels of care. So they are low intensity care, they are not high care, they are not acuity, and they have elective treatment. So they're free to come and go. They can go to the shops, they can work, they're normal citizens, which are not mandated by the Department of Health. It's voluntary. There's a referral system from carers, GPs, community health teams, etc. And as I said, some of them work, but they're on medication. And Roshana can answer particular questions on the level of care if that's requested.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Aronson. So that was your 3 minutes. And I'll just ask councillors if there's any questions. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As an architect,
Yes.
the design of the current 6 villas units, would you say that was a good design for a private psychiatric hostel?
Look, I think they're designed as, my understanding is there are 6 of them. One is dedicated purely to women. The intention is not specifically as a psychiatric hostel. It is as shared living facilities. As I said previously, I'm not the architect on there. I know that there is quite a lot of controls, a lot of supervision, gates, that sort of thing. So security is quite a major concern. But I think that for the low level of care, which is intended, the intention is for them to be a home, the same as anybody else would have. And it's not intended to institutionalize the people who live and work there. The intention is that they are just residents of Midland.
The development in Kalamunda that you spoke about, and if I remember, you designed it. Was that for a private psychiatric hostel?
No, it isn't. It is aged care, but it does have a large dementia facility attached to it, and there are quite a lot of elements which are related to nurses, doctors, etc., and security issues attached to that as well.
And the current Vic Park site, what's the zoning of that property?
The zone of that property it's a nursing home. It's a residential use.
Residential? And
Yeah.
what's the closest distance to residential properties?
The residential properties are next door. So literally you have quite established streets, heritage houses. As I said, you've got Ursula Frayne College immediately next door to it. It's on Shepparton Road, so not far from the coffee strip as well.
And last question, Madam Mayor, for others. You said that the residents that are proposed to be relocated currently at Vic Park, have they been relocated or they're to be relocated?
They haven't been relocated. They are in situ in Vic Park. Yeah.
So there's no one in this property at the moment.
In this property in Midland? No.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Howlett.
Thank you, Mark. Might be a question for you or for Dino, but the question is smoking permitted by the residents of the currently and the proposed new site in Midland?
Yeah. May I refer that question to Dr. Narlin, if that's okay?
Thank you. I am Dr. Nalin, and it's our main target is to leave them, to feel them that this is their own houses. But according to safety, normally in these unit houses we have a alarm system, so it's not allowed to have smokes inside the unit, each unit.
Thank you. So that takes me to my second question. How is drift smoke managed? Because we have incidences of group dwelling facilities within the City of Swan that are situated in residential or very close to, next door to residential properties. And drift smoke from residents is a major concern. So I'd like to know how that's planning to be managed, please.
And at the very moment also we are facing this same situation in our other facilities. And what we are doing is, because with the help of doctors, and it's like NDIS houses, and there are physiotherapists, behavioral therapists, normally we have a system, recovery system. So always with the recovery system, we do a lot of activities with them to feel this is their own house. And the classic example which I can provide is, as we discussed with Park, earlier there were a lot of issues with smoking inside the hostel, but now it's not happened. Even for last 6 months I can say easily they are not, because they know what to do and it's their own house, what they feel, and because of the safety, when they realize what it is and how to live, that's the project here, because it's 6 separate houses. So what we are trying to let them know is that this is your house, you are free to live here like independently.
Thank you, but that doesn't change. So there's no plans to manage smoke externally with other residents, considering other residents like next door neighbours, for example. So if I live next door to John Street and the residents were going outside for a cigarette because they don't smoke inside, which is good, and the drift smoke was bothering me because I have asthma or my children are playing in their yard, there's no measures that you have in place to stop. I mean, it's a very tough one to manage,
Yes.
but that is going to be a problem, I can tell.
And it's a tough problem at the moment. Even last year we had a serious talk with Chief Psychiatrist also regarding this issue. And so Chief Psychiatrist advised all the community-based treating team to mitigate this issue. Still, it's under construction, I would say. It's because what we do is we are service providers, and with major behavioral support, it should be come through the treating team. So this last inspection done by the Office of Chief Psychiatrist clearly advised this community mental health team to rectify these issues and make a plan. So we do the discussions at the moment for all of our facilities. Still going on.
Thank you. Councillor Prodovnik.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Oh, great. one of the concerns that has come back to me from John Street residents, just a handful of them, I guess they're just a little bit apprehensive about what kind of people are going to be living in that facility. And you've referenced low care. Can you give us a bit more information about what that means practically? Like when you select these people, what's your criteria that says they're low care, and what does that translate into? What kind of people will be living next door?
Actually, we run low care facilities. Low care means we have a team. Always when we are getting a referral, we are discussing this with the treating team. We have our own GP as well as the community treating team. Here it's a Swan Clinic, Midland. So then they know the system of ours, and then we are talking. And because we don't provide high care facilities, there are high care facilities. It means severe schizophrenic, severe forensic cases. We don't look after those clients. Then once we get the referral, we are discussing this with the psychiatrist of the community services. Then we are taking the decision whether if they are happy to take the client with us, then we are taking the client.
So you mentioned treating. Can you give us a bit more information about what people are being treated for, just to paint a bit of a picture here?
Yeah, treating means we don't treat the clients. The residents, it's a community mental health team. So they visit weekly to see the clients, all the clients, as well as the GP. GP, they are visiting clients regularly and alter medication sometimes with the disease.
So, for example, it could be something like just bipolar, or
Yes.
so I'm just trying to get a picture of.
Yes. Sometimes, especially as you said, comes with the bipolar. Sometimes now, if the client is so depressive, and if we can, because our staff can diagnose those because we are having our own training system. So they are directly informing, daily they are informing end of the day to the case managers. So then they can come and see the clients.
Okay, and my last question, you mentioned there's a very small number of police call-outs. I think you said last year nothing, and the 2 years before only one each year. Are you able to let us know what prompted the police to attend that site?
Yeah, one was that one client, they have a big issue with outsider. What has happened was they are good friends. So the friend visited, and he was not happy. So he directly called police and said, "Look, there's an outsider." But really, what has happened was they were friends. So when friend is coming, what we are asking is, okay, you can see the client in outside. There are special places. So, but he directly called police and said, "Look, I got a visitor and I'm not happy with the person." So then police visited and settled the issue.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, how many current residents will continue into the new psychiatric hostel?
Thank you. Earlier we had 31, but the setup was different in Victoria Park. Then we discussed about this new system. Now we have there only 24 people who are ready to come and stay here.
Okay, I don't think I quite got the question asked. So currently in John Street, in this facility of group dwellings, there are existing residents. How many of those existing residents will continue into the new John Street Psychiatric Hostel if it is approved?
If it's approved, we are taking the clients from Victoria Park facility. We are shutting down the Victoria Park facility, councillor. So there are 24 members there, residents, which we are planning to move into the new facility.
Okay, so you're saying there will be zero
Yeah, at this very moment, it's zero.
people from the existing facility will remain. Okay, and what is going to happen to the people who are living there at the moment? Is there anybody there?
Sorry?
No, did you?
Is anybody living there at the moment?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No one is there.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. This facility, did Roshana design, apply for and build it? Did Roshana design, apply for and build this facility?
Yes.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm the project manager. Yes, in 2019, we applied for group dwelling, and we have got the approval for the last unit for the uh, um, dependent or age person dwelling. So when we ask the council, we ask, can you just please provide us the dependent or the age person dwelling? That was our application. We didn't ask for the psychiatric hostel application. So the city has decided, okay, this is more than that. So they have gone into that. But when we design, we have got the approval from Department of Health, and our plans have gone to the Department of Health, and they have approved it.
Thank you. And do you know when you applied for a group dwelling, if there were any objections to that use?
We didn't have any objections for that DA.
So there are no objections for that purpose, but now you want to change the use from a group dwelling to the psychiatric purpose. And there are now complaints. So some of the residents are very upset that that wasn't asked in the first instance. That's really effectively I'm trying to establish, and you've answered that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, are there any further questions? They'll be in 6.3, thanks. Councillor Knight.
Thank you. Why are you leaving Vic Park? What's happening to that property? Why are you coming out here?
Victoria Park, we have got the approval for 120 aged care beds. That's the first reason, and then approval will be lapse end of this year. And also, the Department of Health have deemed that the current building is not satisfied for a further accommodation for these 24 residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any final questions? Anyone that hasn't had a question? No? Thank you very much to the project manager, also to Mr. Aronson, and also to Dr. Nali for that information. I'm just going to get ready. And then we move on to Mr. Nick Hiding, Urban Planning, in support of the officer's recommendation. And thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. Nick Hiding Urban Planning, applicant for the proposed private psychiatric hostel in Midland. The term private psychiatric hostel is a term that comes from the Department of Health licensing, and although the application is described as such, as has been discussed previously, the facility will in fact operate as a low care gated residential facility for the care of those with mental and physical disabilities, similar to NDIS housing. The dwellings have been recently constructed as group dwellings and has not been operational to this point. As explained previously, its project is aimed at relocating residents from Victoria Park, which is being developed as an aged care facility. The new aged care facility is required to be commenced for construction very urgently to meet substantial commencement approval conditions, and therefore it's critical that the John Street Midland application be approved to enable the relocation. In addition, as Dino has described, the existing Victoria Park facility is no longer suitable under new licensing requirements, and a new facility has been pursued to accommodate the existing residents, and that's why this facility is being pursued. It's a recommendation for approval from officers in the agenda papers tonight, which we support. The key issues are described in the report on page 71 and 72 of the papers, and they set out concisely what is being sought and the measures proposed to ensure the safety, privacy and amenity of the residents and of the local community. The officer's report also summarises the objections that have been received on the application and sets out that those have been addressed. During the application process, we provided further information to the city in response to some of these objections and these summary of issues outlined from the community consultation. And we've provided additional information to the city to deal with those. The city's officers have recommended an operational management plan be prepared as a condition of approval, and this operational management plan is required prior to occupancy but also maintained in perpetuity and reviewed annually, and we accept this. The facility is required to be licensed under Department of Health and will need to conform to those conditions under that licence as well. So all in all, we seek the officers' recommendation to be adopted by this council through their deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hidding. I've a question from Councillor Howlett.
Thank you very much, Nick. I don't know if you can answer this question, but is it correct that Roshana operate a low care residential facility next door at 42 John Street called Honeybrook?
I do believe that's the case.
I've just got a question about that. Have there been any instances that have caused residents concerns directed from that particular facility in the past that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, but perhaps.
Yes, true, because it's a hostel setup. It's not like unit houses. The clients we are catering in that place is totally different.
But it's similar in the sense that it operates a low care residential facility for people with mental impairment or mental problems?
Yes.
Okay. And have you had any problems arising from that particular facility?
There are issues because they are living in a common, all 38 clients are living in the same, under the same roof. So there are some, the behavior problems, and we are, but it's not going to that level, to a higher level, because there are most of the people in, especially that place is living sometimes more than 10 years, 12 years, and it's always filled. We don't have any, even at this very moment, we don't have any vacant bed in Honeybrook Lodge because of the services that we provide.
So I see good and bad with that. I see maybe a bit of a conflict for the residents who've been at Honeybrook in a group dwelling that might get a bit envious of those moving next door into single dwelling. But did you receive? Okay, no, that's probably all I need to know. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Given that there's been complaints from residents about people jumping into their backyard and the like, that is of concern to me. But the question is, why, given that you ultimately had a plan for this to be for psychiatric services, why did you apply for group dwelling?
I don't have the answer for that. Do you want to speak to that, the history on the project?
Well, it's a planning matter, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, because now...
Not a medical matter, a planning matter.
Because why we are going to this project means now with the Mental Health Commission and LARU, that those are the main governing bodies, we should run a recovery-based hostels. That was the idea of these hostels. The recovery means that we are having a separate recovery wing. Recovery means sometimes this is what we have noted was, sometimes as one councillor stated that bipolar, schizophrenia, what we have noted was the cognitive function. Even though they are physically, mentally they are independent, what we have noted was cognitive function is not developing. Otherwise, they are very suitable to live in the community with us. So that's why we thought to make separate houses with separate kitchen, so we can teach them with our recovery team how to cook, how to be independent. That's why we make this project.
Thank you. So to be clear though, you were well aware that it would be for the psychiatric purposes that you're applying for now?
Yeah, because the cohort is psychiatric clients.
Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, and probably continuing on from Councillor Henderson's question, as a planning consultant, do you agree this is a retrospective application for the private psychiatric hostel?
It's not a retrospective, it hasn't operated before, so it's not a retrospective application. I guess the initial advice that Roshana had was that it didn't require a specific planning approval for use based on some of their other facilities they've been operating as normal residences, and then they've been licensed as such through the Department of Health. But on this project, when they applied for their licence, they consulted with the City of Swan, who felt the need to put into place a planning land use. And at the time of making our application, after speaking with the city, we actually applied for aged or dependent persons dwellings. That was the way our application was actually made. And then through the assessment, the city thought, no, look, in fact, we need to really specify the particular land use, and that's why it's dealt with as a use not listed for a private psychiatric hostel to match with the Department of Health licensing. So I guess it's been a bit of a learning curve for the group to make sure the planning land use has been applied for correctly. But it doesn't align with some of their other projects in Perth where they've got licensed facilities, just normal residential dwellings.
For private psychiatric hostels? Or
That's the
aged care?
license. I mean,
Or
it's
aged
a
care?
very...
Because the architect said he was designing one in Kalamunda, which was obviously aged care.
That's correct, that's aged care.
Are we talking aged care now or private psychiatric hostels?
But other similar low care facilities for mental and physical disabilities, and their existing operations are normal residential housing with Department of Health licence.
Okay, and another question, Madam Mayor, and I'm not sure if it's the planner or the doctor might want to answer this one. You're asking for either 30 or 36, there's two different figures there, of residents. My understanding is you're relocating them from Vic Park, but you've said there's only 24. So do you intend to add more, or will it be 24, and then when people leave, it will keep going down and down, or you keep bringing more and more in?
I think I'll just speak to that first. There's a condition recommended by the officers limiting to 30, and that's based on the number of dwellings that are on site being proposed for this particular facility. So there's 6 dwellings, but the front dwelling is going to be operating as a administration. The balance 5 dwellings will have 6 rooms or beds to accommodate residents, so there's a total of 30. Correct in that there's 24 current residents from Victoria Park will go in here straight away, allowing for future referrals because there's room. So as time goes on, some will leave, new ones will subscribe and be referred, and the numbers will fluctuate, as you can appreciate. Yeah.
So you've answered my question. It's not just about relocating the current people, patients. It's about shifting the whole operations here.
Correct. It's an ongoing thing. The immediate need is to relocate, but as time goes on, it'll facilitate the referral of others.
Well, councillors, are there any further questions for Mr Hidding? No? Thank you very much for coming in tonight. And we then move to 14.3.6, which is the proposed Brabham Stage 3 Local Structure Plan, which is Lot 822 on Yuldine Road, Brabham, Swan SP 2024/1 on page 103. And we have in-person deputations from Ms Jan Zek, not in support of the officer's recommendation. Evening, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. 2,500 trees to be demolished. The value of these trees is around $21,600,000. What can't be measured is the material cost of tree canopy loss, which can only be assessed indirectly. What can be measured is cost of fill. Added to this is the environmental cost of clearing more trees for sand mining. These mines are located on high ground in the landscape, the habitat of bankshirs. So there's the further cost to the environment. Further cost is habitat loss, not only for the black cockatoos and quenda, but also numerous other flora and fauna that haven't reached the ecologically threatened list yet. The bankshirs on this site, or 25.9 hectares, are part of the threatened ecological community protected by the EPBC Act. They, along with the adjacent bankshirs in the Bush Forever Site 200, are the last stand of bankshirs between Nangara Road and Reed Highway. Everything else has been cleared or earmarked for removal. The reason Banksia Woodlands is a threatened community, like the black cockatoos, is because there are very few of them left. Their habitat has been reduced and fragmented to such a degree that they are at risk of collapse. If this happens, a whole ecosystem collapses with them. The developer makes much of the EPBC approval it received and has tied it to the 4.35 hectares of Banksia woodland proposed for conservation in public open space number 5, The approval was actually to remove 29.02 hectares of black cockatoo habitat. The documents and methodology to measure vegetation habitat have been carefully massaged to produce the best outcome for the developer. Of the 2,107 trees on the site, only 283 have managed to make the editor's cut. This was achieved by being cavalier with facts. The report would have you believe that only trees that have a diameter greater than 50 centimetres can be a black cockatoo habitat. This is not correct. On this basis, there are 1,326 potential nesting and roosting trees on lot 822, not 283, as noted in the report, and by inference, over 1,200 within the LSP area, not the 258 noted. The developer has used the same methodology in reporting the amount of black cockatoo habitat, employing the meanest method that could be used. The resultant area, along with the majority, but not all, of the Banksia woodlands on site, make up the total area of 33.37 hectares. This is a very convenient sum, because if you subtract the 4.35 conservation area, you get 29.02.
And thank you
Can
very
I
much.
ask for an extension
You
so we
may.
can hear the end of the
Do I have a seconder?
deputation?
Councillor Dawn, for how long was it?
Until the end of the deputation.
Is there anyone against? That's 2 more minutes,
Thank you. The exact amount of the black cockatoo habitat that the EPBC approval permits the developer to clear. This means that with the use of other legislated mechanisms, the whole of the site, apart from the 4.35 hectares, can be bulldozed, all legally. In the same way, reports have been economic with the facts. They fail to mention that the Banksia woodlands on the Bush Forever Site 200 will likely be impacted by the development, and that these Banksia woodlands are also recognised foraging habitat for black cockatoos. If the woodlands are likely to be impacted, so will the black cockatoos. The same applies to the 4.35 hectares of Banksia conservation area. They fail also to mention the referral guideline requirement for a buffer to protect the Banksia woodlands, and that if an activity within the buffer zone is likely to have a significant impact on the ecological community, then it would require EPBC Act approval also. Considering all the devastation that Brabham Stage 3 development is going to cause and how much pressure this is going to put on the Bush Forever Site 200, it is imperative that the Council supports and promotes the alignment, realignment and the establishment of the Ecological Linkage 32 in real terms. Yes, it will cost the government to construct the necessary wildlife overpasses, and yes, it will mean less land for houses. But look at the habitat that has already been lost. The loss of habitat for Brabham Stage 3 alone would warrant the realignment and construction of this linkage. The cost of the environment of developing Brabham Stage 3 runs into tens of millions of dollars for the things that we can put a price on. For those we can't, there's probably hundreds of millions. The wildlife overpasses and loss of a few hectares of housing seem very little compensation for all that has been and will be lost in the future. Thank you.
That's the extension for 2 minutes. Thank you for that deputation. Councillor Howlett had a first question.
Thank you for that deputation. I just want to talk about the diameter of the tree. You said that your reference to trees with a greater diameter of 50 centimetres can only be classed as a potential habitat is as incorrect. Why is that incorrect? Can you explain that?
Because the guidelines actually say that the habitat trees are between 30 centimetres to 50 centimetres. But that's not the only criteria for judging them, the black cockatoos will use roosting trees. Anything that's a tall tree will be a roosting tree. Foraging trees, there are a number of trees that they forage in, but there's a whole mixture of foraging trees. But as far as the roosting trees and the habitat and the nesting trees go, then black cockatoos, particularly carnabes, will nest in artificial hollows as well. Sorry, Does that answer your question?
Question, if that's right. Thank you. Could you mentioned the meanest method to measure the black cockatoo habitat. Can you explain what you meant by that with the developer using the meanest method possible?
What has happened in the past, when they did the 2015 referral, the area that was occupied by the vegetation type was mapped as a perimeter of that, as the canopy that was mapped on the from aerial photographs. So you got it like a patch of vegetation. What they've done now is they've picked out each individual tree and just mapped a small canopy area for that. So even though you can do that, it's very, very mean.
Just have two more questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Why are large and old trees important to the black cockatoos? And what are the threats to the black cockatoos? I'll just combine that question.
Okay. The reason why large trees are important is because it's only when they get to something like 80, 100 years, 120 years old that they actually start to produce hollows, and that's what the black cockatoos use to nest in. So that time frame is really important, that having trees that are that old. So on the site, I think that there are 37 trees that are between between a metre and a metre 83 in diameter. So they would be hundreds of years old. Possibly, they were saplings. The biggest ones would have been saplings when Stirling sailed up the Swan. They're very old. Sorry, what was the other part of the question?
The threat.
The threat to black cockatoos. One of the biggest threats is roadkill. That if they are foraging by the side of a road and they drop honky nuts and things like that on the ground, then they drop to the ground to eat them and the seeds, and then because they're such big birds, it's very hard for them to take off. So they're very, very vulnerable to passing traffic. So having them anywhere in road verges is, well, it's asking for trouble.
Do you have further questions? That's it. Councillor Bowman, and then.
Thank you. Thanks, Jan, and thanks for taking myself and Councillor Henderson out on a detailed trip. The water table, you know more about that than me. Can you explain what's the water table there is like, and the concerns with what will happen with the water table changing?
The water table on the northern end of the lot 822 is very high. The consultants have said that themselves, that in basic terms, I suppose they said that in winter the water table is at ground level. So it's a very wet area. The bank shears are on the southern end where the ground rises. I think that just in the northern edge of the Bush Forever site, the ADH is 27, which is the highest on all of the old Caversham Air Base. So, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the rest. I'm getting old.
Explaining what the water table was like, and obviously any concerns with what would happen if the water table changes.
Oh, thank you, yes. So the really big problem with the water table is that when it rises, it will rise with urban development. I mean, everyone knows that. There's no question about it. But the big problem when the water table rises is what sort of effect it will have on the Banksia woodlands, because they are really susceptible to rising water table, and they're also very susceptible to the water table changing quickly. So things like dewatering when you're doing construction will be a problem, because that will flow onto the Banksia woodlands as well. So there will be an impact on those, and that hasn't been looked at this stage at all. But the big problem with Banksia woodlands is if they get wet feet, they die. That'll be the end of them.
And next question, you talked about sensitive areas, Bush Forever sites. What's your views on the high school abutting a Bush Forever site?
I have a real problem with it there. I have a problem with the oval being that close as well because the oval will be irrigated on that site because of the size of it on the side of the Banksia woodlands too, that there will be impacts back onto the Banksia woodlands in the Bush Forever site. But I'm also concerned about the possibility of fire, that what happens when you have urban development is that you get an increase in incidental fires that are, I suppose, what you'd say, they are man-made. They're not ones that happen by accident. So there is always the risk of that sort of thing. There's the risk of weeds getting into the Bush Forever site and things like that. But I suppose that with the oval and with the high school, it would be more about the bushfire threat, about the distance that you'd need to be away from the Banksia woodlands. And I'm just trying to think what else there was there. I'm sorry.
Final question. You talked about the ecological corridor linkage, and obviously on the map it's easier. Can you just explain that in a little bit simpler terms? My understanding is the issue is the block next door, in between Drumpelia and this, that we don't know what's happening with that. Is that what you're sort of referring to as well?
Yes. Originally, the lot 94, which has now come out for public comment for rezoning, was part of Whiteman Park, and that was annexed by the Drumpelia Drive and also the railway line. But what's happened with the ecological linkage that this council endorsed back in 2003 or 2004, I think it was, that it originally went through the Caversham Air Base and went up to where Brabham Town Centre lives now, and then went into Whiteman Park. Because of all the urban development, that's been lost. And so the big problem with Bush Forever now is that if it becomes isolated, then it will struggle to survive. So being able to make the connection back to Whiteman Park is extremely important for things like for the wildlife to move through that area, for there to be the biodiversity that's required to keep them vital, for water when things in different areas dry, that there's always permanent or has been permanent water on Whiteman Park, particularly Muscle Pool. But there's also, if there's a bushfire, that they need to be able to escape from the Bush Forever site, otherwise they'll be trapped on that site and that will be the end of them. So there's a whole heap of reasons why the ecological linkage is important. But I mean, it's in all of your documents. It's in so many of the City of Swans documents that it's something that you can't turn your back on anymore. Considering that all this development for Brabham has cut off the ecological linkage, that it's really incumbent upon the council and the state government to reinstate it. And the only place that's possible at this stage is through Lot 94.
Councillor Dawn.
And yeah, thanks very much, Jan, for that deputation, and thanks very much for the tour also. I really appreciate that. Just in relation to, you said that there's Banksias on the Bush Forever 200 site that are part of the same patch as those on the LSP site. How do you know what's on the Bush Forever site 200?
Well, we're going on the documents that were produced back in the late 90s, early 2000. When some of the flora studies were done at that stage. The big problem is we don't really know, only from being able to look at what we can see on Google Maps, and from this document that was the documents that were produced back in the late 90s. There were supposed to be further studies done, and the bushland management plan that was done for Bush Forever back in 2009 requested that further studies be done. I rang DPLH the other day and asked them if those studies were available, if anything further had been done, because there was a recommendation in the Bushland Management Plan back in 2009 that they update the flora study and they actually undertake a fauna study that had never been done. There was only a desktop survey that was done, I think, in the late 90s. The response from DPLH is that I'd have to go through freedom of information to get that information, which is just crazy. So yes, we know that they are there because they were mapped back in 2001.
But no recent assessment has been done.
No, nothing recent.
Okay.
No.
I have another question. How much do you think that in the sand, the fill that you talked about, how much do you think the fill required for the LSP as a ballpark figure? How much do you think that would be?
I don't really know. What I do know is that back in 2021, when the Brabham Stage 2 came up for consideration, I did some calculations on information that we got back in the 90s about how much fill would be required for the whole of the area. And then I upgraded it to the money that would be required to pay for that in 2021, and it was $500 million. $500 million. It was mind-blowing. So since then, since 2021, thanks to inflation, you could add another $66 million to that. It's a considerable amount.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just got one more question. The fauna assessment says that quenda have the potential to inhabit the site. Do you have any evidence of quendas on the site?
Well, I do know that the consultants who walked through the site believed that they would be there because they did a desktop survey, but they went during the day, so they were highly unlikely to see them. Where I live is in the ecological linkage overlay, and there are quendas at our place, and I see their scats everywhere. I see them there, and I'm sure that they're, and I have heard from other people that they see them as well. So there are definitely quendas there.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jan. I've got some questions for the staff.
APM 6.3, so we'll take them just a bit later after the
Okay, sorry
deputations.
about that,
That's
Mayor.
right. Councillor Henderson.
Jan, thanks very much. You might think you're getting a little bit old, but
I am.
your expertise over the many years of this particular area is of great value. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
The southeast corner bushland that's proposed to be preserved. What concerns do you have about the interface to the urban part of the proposed development?
Well, the first thing that springs to mind is the fact that the landscape design drawings have weed species in it. So the weed species of, I think there's the Angostura costata, the Melaleuca leucodendron, and also the Corymbia maculata, the spotted gum. So they're three species of weed plants that you wouldn't put anywhere near the Banksia woodlands because they have, as I said before, one of the biggest threats to the Banksia woodlands is the weed species. So I'm just trying to think what else you were saying. Right,
Are
sorry.
there any, if you like, appropriate buffers or the like that would be proposed?
Yes, well, I mean, I said that before, that they do need to have a buffer. The buffer is recommended between 20 and 50 metres. So putting a road right next to it isn't necessarily what would be considered as being an appropriate buffer. But they certainly need to be isolated from the urban development because of the issues that are there. But not only that, that if the Banksia woodlands are used by the black cockatoos as foraging habitat, then you've got the same problem again, that if they get onto the road, then they're just a waiting target, really.
So another question in regard to drainage to the south. I think the drainage proposal is to take it into the Bush Forever site through an open drain down to Harrow on quite a shallow drop. I think it's 1 in 500 or something.
Can I just ask you?
What impact would that have on the local area, given that I think you're probably more aware than most about the flooding and the like that happens in the area.
My understanding was it was going to be a pipe drain. Have I got that wrong? Oh, right. Oh, really? I missed that. That's a few things I did miss. Taking it through Bush Forever is tantamount to cutting up Bush Forever again. I mean, the fragmentation of Bush Forever sites and any of the conservation areas is just, I mean, that's the sort of stuff that just destroys them. It's one of the biggest issues for any of the conservation areas, that if you start fragmenting them, you increase the border of them, which means more weeds can get in, that they have more problems with interference from outside, that particularly Banksia woodlands, which I think I said before, that the interference with the root system and things like that, that they are highly susceptible to problems like that. So I would say to put it through Bush Forever would be a serious problem, a really serious problem.
Thank you. Another question. I think I saw on some drawings that some bicycle path connections were proposed to go south through the Bush Forever site as well. Would you be concerned about impact on, well, not just the bicycle traffic, but also the whole Bush Forever site in terms of human invasion, if you like, and the impacts that might bring?
Yes, for all the same reasons. That, I mean, if you've got an area that's a conservation area rather than a recreation area, which Bush Forever was made to conserve things like Banksia woodlands that are a threatened ecological community, and because there are, I think, less than 10% of them that are protected. So they're in serious trouble. So if you start to introduce other pursuits like, you know, recreational things like bushwalking and bicycle riding and things like that through them, then you need to put paths through them, that you're starting to have people coming in with things like Phytophthora, the diseases. I mean, disease is a serious problem for Banksia woodlands. So then you get the weed species coming in, you get all sorts of things. But I think one of the other problems too is that it increases the opportunity for fires to happen within the area, and I mean, that would just be devastating.
Thank you. I really appreciate your effort.
Thanks.
The Councillor Caldano.
Hi, Jan. Thank you. I've got a few questions. When you talk about how the Banksia woodlands in the development site and in the Bush Forever are going to be impacted by this development, I mean, what are the main things that you're thinking about? What are you really talking about?
I suppose it would be much the same sort of thing that I've been saying, that the water really would be the biggest problem. The rising water table is a serious problem, and particularly during construction, as I said, that having dewatering will cause fairly instant changes to the water table. So that will make it really difficult for Banksia woodlands. So that would be a major impact on them. Having housing right next to them, having no buffer next to them, having cars driving right next to them, having weed species next to them, all of those things, any of those and all of those are an impact on the Banksia woodlands.
And do you know if anyone's, any of the state government agencies or anyone has done any studies into how dewatering through the growth corridor area is going to impact on the Swan Valley in terms of water table and in terms of just, I mean, obviously this whole growth corridor then is just basically being dried out. Has anyone done any studies on how that's going to impact on Swan Valley, but also on Whiteman Park?
I'm not really the person to ask, I don't think. But I think that much
Do
more
you know
technical
of any
people-
Studies?
Sorry?
Do you know of any studies?
No, I don't know of any studies.
Yeah.
I mean, they were the things that we asked for back in 1993, that at that stage we were saying that we do not have baseline information. I mean, now we do have baseline information. It was taken, while development was going on. but having that information and being able to have access to it is a serious problem. We haven't had access to the data. All we know is anecdotally what we see happening in the landscape. And what happened over 2 years on our we've got a creek run, Wandoo Creek runs through our property. So back in, I think it was 2021, 2022, for 3 months over summer, our creek ran. This is a winter creek that runs for maybe 1 week of the year in winter. It ran for 3 months with water that was being pulled out of the landscape further upstream than us. I mean, that causes serious issues within the landscape, and I know that last year was particularly bad, but we've lost a number of trees on our property now. There have been a lot of trees that, and an exorbitant number of trees that have died in Woolcott Avenue this last summer, which they've never done before. That I know I mean, you could ask Harry the same question, that he has been keeping records of what's been happening with the water table within this area. But the biggest problem, I think, is that it's a changing water table. That what happens with urban development is the water table rises, and that will cause more of a problem to the Banksia woodlands than what a lowering water table will, within reason, of course.
Okay, so when you talk about ecosystem collapse, what does that mean to you? Can you share that vision of ecosystem collapse with all of us, please?
But if the Banksia woodlands go, then there's no foraging habitat the foraging habitat for black cockatoos would be cut by 50%. I mean, that would be the death knell for them. That would be really serious. But it's not just that. There are other trees like the Nutsia floribunda, the West Australian Christmas tree, which is has an incredibly rich foliage. I mean, much richer than what the Banksia woodlands are. And that supports a huge number of insects, of mammals, small mammals like honey possums, things like that, that live on that. And that without the Banksia woodlands, which they're associated with, then the habitat for those goes as well. And I know that there are 16 of them on site because I counted them. There is not one I can guarantee that will survive the Brabham Stage 3. There won't be any of those left. So the more you cut out the species in a habitat, the more vulnerable it becomes to things like disease and fire and everything else that just loses its vitality.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Jan, on Ferguson Close, on the western side, there's a guy there who used to farm roses for flowers. I think his name was Troy or Troy Norwood, something like that. He contacted me about all of his roses being flooded across the whole area as a result of the works that were being done along Woolcott and the like. Did you hear of any other problems of flooding throughout the area as a result of those works?
I understand that the properties that are on Woolcott Avenue, just at the end of Ferguson Close, have got a fairly serious problem with water inundation.
So clearly, if that was done around Banksias, we'd be in trouble.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Councillors, are there any further questions for Ms. Eck? All right, thank you very much for your deputation tonight and for the questions.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
That's all right. And then we move on to Mr. Harry Gratt, not in support of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry, and you have 3 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah, hi. I'm Harry Gratt. I'm a Swan Valley farmer. I'm 69, and I spent most of my life in the area of the land in question. I describe it as a drained swamp. The swamp was drained for the purpose of building an airstrip for World War II. It's got a very high water table, and that's supported by the underlying clays, which are very shallow, and they run right up well kilometres into Whiteman Park. So it's a very difficult site. It's going to need heaps of filling. The old airstrip had a drainage system and it used to run 4 pipes about that big. And that's all been destroyed by the earlier Brabham developments. So good luck when you find that again. And it's there underground somewhere. Environment, you've already heard a lot from Jan, so I'll try and minimise what I say there. But care is really needed to minimise the damage to bush forever by what's happening on Brabham 3. For example, you're building over the ecological lineages with Brabham 3 was just ridiculous. On tree canopy, you've also got, it wasn't mentioned, the heat sink problem, and you've already got a very hot Brabham. But planning says they have to plant a tree in a 4 square metre plot. Well, you take a drive around Dayton and Brabham and you find a tree. Those 4 square metres become paving, patios and roll-on turf. There's no compliance. Threatened ecological communities, you've heard about that. You need to preserve more Banksia woodland on this site. Water will rise and fall, and that's going to severely damage the bush forever. I farm by Dayton, and I've suffered a 200 to 300 millimetre rise in groundwater, and it's continuing. Once it moves off site, no one cares. I'm just a farmer, I don't matter. Move on to Henley Brook Avenue, that dreaded chestnut. That was, this plan assumes that that road will be built. It's a 1994 alignment that was put in place to service Ellenbrook. Ellenbrook services itself now. A lot of change both in structure and policy. And there's been no effort to address it. We now have Tonkin, Drumpelia, Isadoon, Arthur, a train line. And just to build it, there's this mentality of the City Swan of just build it. And I think it's time that changed. It dissects bush forever by 1.6 kilometres, and that's just ridiculous. It'll be built 2 metres above ground level, and that will wipe out all the night flying birds because they'll be hit by cars. It's unplanned. At this stage, there's no hydrology done, environment, European or Aboriginal heritage, policy
Thank you very
compliance.
much. That's your 3 minutes, unless Councillor Henderson.
30 seconds more.
I have Councillor Jones. Is there anyone against? No. Thank you. Another 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. No hydrology, heritage, policy compliance, permits, risk analysis and budget has been done for this road. And I think if you do all that, you're going to find that you either relocate it or scrap it. There's some major issues down that road. And if anyone wants to have a look, I'll show you. Road's been subject to traffic modelling, but the modelling has not determined the need for the road. It's only modelled the road, which is bizarre. But we get back to this just build it attitude. And don't be fooled by the development contribution money. It's not a lot of money. It's going to cost you a bundle more, and most of the developers have now disappeared. The solution is to make Yuildene a 4-lane road and to take it to Drumpelia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Do you have any questions for Mr. Craig from councillors? Councillor Bowman.
Thanks, and thanks, Harry. Harry, I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but in the report, it identified one threatened priority flora species, the Verticordia. I'll stop there. Can you refresh my memory what you said about if you go looking at the wrong time of the year, you won't find them and the reasons why?
Well, the Verticordia it's a perennial plant, so that's not so bad, and it's easiest to see when it's flowering, obviously, and it's a springtime thing. There's quite a patch of it in Bush Forever 200. I can't say I've walked over it in the development zone, but I haven't grid marched it. I've been through a lot of it over time. What you won't find, for example, is things like orchids that are a corm. So you do your survey in the dry season, you're going to find nothing.
I'm hesitant to ask this question about Henley Brook Avenue, but I will, since you brought it up before. The traffic impact assessment talks about based on Henley Brook Avenue. Obviously, you've raised a number of concerns with Henley Brook Avenue. Do you think, having lived in the area for a long time and seeing the changes, that if Henley Brook Avenue is not extended, that they'll have issues with traffic for this development?
On West Swan Road, we already have excessive traffic, and to build Henley Brook Avenue, it's proposed to have many connections across to West Swan Road, and we all know commuters take the shortest route, so it will remain a rat run forever because they'll simply feed down Henley Brook Avenue and across.
And the final question regarding part of Henley Brook Avenue and this development, the gas pipeline and the distance.
The Henley Brook Avenue is currently planned to resume some of the APA natural gas pipeline, which has got pipes this big and they're this far above ground. So you'll have a four-lane roundabout, partly within a gas station. And we all know what comes off roundabouts. So you build a huge structure to keep it out, and something hits it and topples over the top. You know, it's happened down the Madra train line. They've had cars on the line. It's just ridiculous. It's just one of the examples of the risk assessment that has not been done on that alignment, that old alignment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Catalano.
Thanks, Harry. I just need to understand a little bit better the idea of rising water table, groundwater, in the Swan Valley. They're draining the growth corridor because that was swamps. And so can you just explain to me how that's creating the groundwater? And if it isn't creating the groundwater, what's the groundwater rising from? How is that rising in the Swan Valley?
The groundwater is coming from urban development. The urban development has a huge area of hard surfaces, roads, roofs, whatever. And even the downpipes from all the roofs go to sumps by building code. And that's sitting on top of the water table. So every downpipe is charging the groundwater. And then there's a groundwater subsoil drainage system, and that draws the water away so that the houses don't actually get flooded. And that then has to spill out somewhere. And obviously it's in Dayton, and a lot of this site, it'll move east, because that happens to be downhill, obviously, towards the river. That's the landscape. And so as it moves across, everybody just wants to get rid of it. They don't want to pipe it to the river. That's not appropriate either. It should be collected and put in the superficial aquifer, and then that should be pumped out by farmers in the Swan Valley. But that's going to cost somebody some money. So once we move it over into the rural zone, we just forget about it. And then what it does, as it travels, it runs into the clays of the Swan Valley. And so then it has to back up. And that's my problem. It's backing up against the clay. And we're getting this rise in water table in my tree farm. We planted the tree farm with a 1 metre separation to water level. So we did move back until we had that. And we've cheated. We've planted some other areas with water tolerant species like Melaleucas paperbugs. But where you've got a metre clearance and suddenly you've got 700 clearance, you start to run problems with trees, problem with extraction, problems moving machinery. So we're okay at the moment. I've lost a few trees, got some difficulties. But let's say I pick up another, I don't know, couple of 100 millimetres of groundwater. You're basically shutting me down.
Yeah, okay. You know, with that groundwater though, it comes off the urban development in. Does it come off in a pipe, or is it stormwater goes into the ground?
Yes.
Yeah, and then it just disperses out from there, or does it go into a drain?
No, there's subsoil drains that collect it.
Subsoil drains.
When it gets to it's supposed to be the average between the high and the low level.
Okay.
And then that will run out to the drainage system.
Yeah.
And some might be an open drain that'll finish up to the river. Some of them, it's put in what we call sumps, a hole in the ground, and it infiltrates. And from once they do that, it can only go one way, and that's go east downhill, and that's me.
I get you. So what it's doing is they're draining it into sumps, and then from sumps, it's basically leaching out into the Swan Valley.
It's just water finds its own level, and you're
I
going to
understand.
you've already got the same issue
Yeah.
with at Brabham. If you go down Yuildene Road and look south, you'll see some really large dead eucalyptus tontianas. They're not big trees, but some of those trees are anciently old. They're very slow growing. They only grow on sand. And they're just about all dead. And that was rising water table caused by urban development.
All right, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Dawn.
Thanks very much, Harry. A lot's been said about the Henley Brook Road extension, but the first I heard about it was when you mentioned about the Yuildene. You mentioned about extending Yuildene Road. Could you repeat what your suggestion was, please?
Well, you could bring Henley Brook. I think you have to bring it down to as far as Walcott now because it's already an approved structure plan through there. Once you get there, it's lunacy to go on through bush forever for 1.6 kilometres. It should go west on Yuildene, which is a blue road, and in your agenda, planning have already commented that it's got too many entries and exits because they want it to be a blue road, oddly enough. And then that would lead you to Drumpellia, which is capable of being 6 lanes. It's the old Perth-Darwin highway alignment, and that runs down to Reid Highway, where there's an interchange. It also crosses Reid Highway, and there's a 4-lane alignment down there to Guildford Road. It's not yet built. So that's the logical place to put the bulk of the traffic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grant. Are there any other questions from councillors before we move on? No, thank you very much for that deputation.
Thank you.
And I'll ask Mr. Alex Jarvis from CLE Town Planning and Design in support of the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Jarvis.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a clarification, it's just going to be one presentation from myself tonight, and then myself and my client will both be available for questions, if that's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name's Alex Jarvis. I'm a town planner at CLE Town Planning, and I'm here with Paul Morgan. He's a estate manager at Peat Limited. And as you're aware, we're here tonight to speak on consideration of the Brabham Third Stage Local Structure Plan. So we're pleased to be here tonight to speak in support of this project. And firstly, we'd like to thank the City's officers for their work to date and the supportive recommendation. We believe the officer report provides a well-considered discussion on the planning framework and contextual considerations that are relevant to this proposal. The structure plan, known as LSP3, was lodged in February following an extensive planning and design process. This included presentation to the City's Design Review Panel on 2 occasions, receiving a strong level of support for the project's objectives and its spatial response to the site's opportunities and constraints. LSP3 has been prepared to support the logical extension of the emerging Brabham estate, which already exists north of Yuildene Road, and will provide a framework for approximately 1,500 additional homes and 4,200 new residents. LSP3 is consistent with the overarching Albion District Structure Plan, and critically will enable a second development front to commence south of Yuildene Road, to support the delivery of additional housing in response to the state's current housing supply crisis. In addition, LSP3 will deliver important community assets and infrastructure. This includes approximately 15% or 11.76 hectares of public open space, which has been carefully considered to support a suitable interface to the adjoining Bush Forever land. The 15% public open space is in addition to the 4.35 hectares of conservation vegetation that's been provided in the southeastern corner of LSP3 and is in accordance with the state's federal environmental approvals. LSP3 will also support the delivery of a high school site and a second primary school site. The high school is required in the short term to support the corridor's growing population, with $15 million set aside in the recent state budget to support detailed planning of the school. Peat and Development WA are actively working with the Department of Education to help facilitate timely delivery of the high school, and have recently executed an agreement to provide early access to the site to support these future works. Further, the structure plan will deliver a residential development in proximity to the new Whiteman Park train station to support the state government's significant infrastructure investment in the area. The train station will be further supported by the expansion of the Brabham District Centre south of Yuildene Road, which will provide a range of convenience and local employment opportunities in proximity to both the train station and the surrounding residents. So in summary, LSP3 is consistent with the planning framework, was supported by the City's Design Review Panel, and will provide several community assets for both existing and future residents. In addition, introducing a new development front will deliver critically needed housing in the area, will help put downward pressure on the state's house prices, and help provide more people with access to housing. Madam Mayor, Council, thank you for your time, and certainly we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr Jarvis, with a few minutes, seconds spare.
Yes,
Just
a
like
bit
pushing
to
out.
fit in.
That's Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Public open space, I see the table that's provided. It says 15%. How much of that is usable public open space as opposed to drainage basins that may or may not be filled with water all the time, or other areas where there's pretty well all trees?
Yeah, so it'll be a combination without giving a sort of specific quantifiable figure. 1 in 1 drainage is a deduction, so certainly that's not included. 1 in 5 drainage, that's part of the restricted open space, which is provided in the table. And then the balance of that is what we call unrestricted public open space. In terms of usability, once we get to subdivision stage, we'll need to work with the city's officers. We'll provide detailed landscaping plans, and at that point we can work through where we need to provide areas of active open space, because certainly people need to have a certain amount of access to active open space, as well as trying to maximise tree retention, which certainly has been a big push for the project. So without providing a quantifiable figure, it'll be based on those numbers and preparing the detailed landscaping plans through subdivision.
So if I look on your park number 5,
it's the conservation vegetation, is it?
So park number 5's in the southeast corner, and you've got what's described as a 5.47 hectares, of which 4.35 is retained, and you're going to have a small kickabout area. So are you telling me 4.35 hectares is not included in the public open space calculation?
It's provided as a deduction to the site area because it's a conservation area, so it is separate. So yeah, it's not included as part of the 10%. That's correct. It's a separate item. So in addition to the 4.35 hectares, we're providing the 15% public open space.
Okay. Why do you think there's a need for so many access entry points off Yuildene Road?
That was advised, I suppose, by the traffic consultant. I suppose it's to provide suitable access and circulation for vehicles. We've got the primary school site along there, as well as the commercial centre. A lot of those accesses are only left in, left out, so they're not all full movement, to make sure that we sort of minimise any impact and traffic conflict. And we understand those access points were supported by the city's engineers. And they all do meet the separation requirements under livable neighbourhoods as well.
Okay. You heard me ask the question before about the high school site. Any reason why it's probably gone what I think is one of the worst positions, but I'm not a planner, and it didn't go on Yuildene Road where the primary school was?
Yeah, I suppose there was a few inputs that went into that. One of the things was a requirement for DOE to have separation between the primary school site and the high school site. Another requirement was that we need to meet a 300 metre separation distance for sensitive land uses to the gas pipeline. So it was really difficult to get an 8 hectare high school site within that area along Yuildene Road, as well as the co-located public open space, whilst not being within the 300 metre setback distance from the gas pipeline. The other thing was we're also still trying to deliver is residential densities in proximity to the commercial centre and as close to the Whiteman Park train station as possible. So that was kind of, all those considerations kind of went together, and that's how we ended up with the high school down along the southern boundary, which we actually do really like in terms of the interface to the Bush Forever. We think that would be a nice interface, and the fact that it had the co-located open space as well, we think that provides a really good transition there rather than having to provide a road or direct residential frontage.
Just my personal views, which is not allowed to give at this point in time. High school's right opposite public open space, bushland. I have a few issues in Allenbrook from residents and ratepayers all the time. The traffic consultant report is dependent, and I will say the word dependent, on Henley Brook Avenue extending further south of Yuildene Road. Has it been looked at and any modelling done if it doesn't extend past Yuildene Road?
Yeah, so certainly appreciate that Henley Brook Avenue is quite a topical issue for council and the city. Just for a little bit of context, the Albion DSP, which applies over the broader area, it shows 2 connections from our site onto Henley Brook Avenue. As part of our modelling, we determined that we believed we could deliver 1, and that would be appropriate in terms of vehicle volumes, and that's why we've reduced that to 1 and provided it in the southeastern corner where it's the least, I suppose, impact on that Bush Forever site. In terms of running an exercise to remove that access point as well, it is actually something that we discussed with the client, but we understand that that work's already been done by the city's engineers. So we opted not to do that work. We were happy to look at that, but we understand that work's actually already been undertaken as a model, if you like.
Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. Is this development state government, Homes West or Department of Communities Development, or is it all for private sale?
It will. Did you want to add any comment on that? So it is owned by Development WA, and it's a joint
Yeah.
venture with Pete Limited.
It's a partnership.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a partnership between Pete Brabham and state government, being Development WA. In terms of your question around Department of Communities, there will be a 10%, so 1 in 9 allocation to social housing. That's across the whole estate.
Sorry, can you repeat that again? Did you say 10% of?
No, there's 1 in 9 allocation to social housing with additional capacity for affordable housing through the relationship with government.
Oh, that's like Key Start. Yeah.
No, not Key Start.
Not Key Start?
No, that's Development WA. Or
So what do you mean by affordable housing, sorry?
It's government supporting government policy to deliver affordable housing.
Oh, you don't know what kind of programs they're talking about?
Not necessarily, but it's made available should they choose to use it.
And that would be what extra percentage then?
It's in the order of 15% on top of the 11%, 1 in 9.
Plus on top of the 11%?
Yes.
Okay. So there could be like 26%.
It could be, yes, but dependent on many factors that are beyond our control though.
Yeah, of course. But a quarter of it could be allocated for state housing. Okay. And what's the height of these? You know, or have you not got to that? You know, you're going to have double-storey buildings, or is it? Or you not got to that yet?
Yeah, sorry, not got to that at this point. We'll be guided by the residential design codes, so it could be single or double storey. That would typically be up to the landowner to decide at a later point.
Okay, all right. And I just wanted to put a question, actually. It strikes me that this is because adequate provision wasn't made for high schools and schools in that growth corridor up until this point, that now all of those facilities, the schools particularly that I seem to, that are proposed for it, that they're actually trying to be squeezed into this area. And, that's just my observation of it now, because it wasn't previously planned for through that growth corridor, and now we've come to this point, well, oh gee, this is the last of the last, so we better squeeze everything in.
Yeah, probably all we can add on that is the overarching Albion District structure plan that did provide for a high school site and a primary school site within this area, but in terms of the broader and historical planning for high schools, I won't be able to comment, unfortunately.
Okay. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is about the interface to Bush Forever 200. Now, I realise it's not your territory. However, you're going to, I'll use the term impacted, with the community development there. So is there any obligation going to be on you to perhaps in some way protect it, fence it or whatever, to keep cats and dogs and kids and fires and the like that have been discussed out of it?
I believe there will be an expectation at subdivision stage for an interface management plan, and in addition to that, the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, their Bush Forever, I think their strategy and engagement section provided comment on the proposal and made reference to providing suitable fencing to manage that interface. So yeah, certainly we'd look at that and do whatever's necessary in terms of managing that interface. That's no problem.
Great, because clearly domestic animals wipe out a hell of a lot of our fauna. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, is there any other questions for Mr Jarvis? Councillor Bowman.
Just one more question, and it's probably to Pete. Since you're working so closely with the state government, that parcel of land between Drumpalia and your site, in particular that northwest corner, any chance you'll be sort of trying to get that so you can then improve the interface from the train station into your site? And if you do, would you then also be trying to leave the bottom portion of it so we can have the ecological corridor.
Did you want to talk to the land tenure? I can talk to a bit of the planning that we've looked at for that. Did you want to talk to land tenure on that? Paul?
Very quickly, yes. I can't really comment too much at the moment about it. It's obviously not under our control, but clearly you can see from the plan it interfaces directly between the train station, as you said. So currently it's West Australian Planning Commission land that's currently under discussion as to its future use. It makes sense, yes, obviously. And the reason it's been excluded from this LSP is because of the fact that the tenure of that strip of land hasn't been determined. But it's a bit of a no-brainer. So,
Councillor Catalano?
Yeah, just on that, that lot that's next door to it that's going to be, that's been put out for advertising. You know, if that was to be urbanised, then have you had discussions about closing off Zuden totally along that strip, and then basically you just have the whole of that area as your subdivision? Is that what, have there been discussions about that? For incorporating that lot basically into this structure plan?
Yes, I mean, so again, at this stage, we only own a portion of the balance of that area, which has been that the remaining portion of lot 822, but we have done an indicative exercise over the balance of that land, firstly, to make sure we provide that seamless and really strong connection through to the train station. That's why we reference that east-west link as Station Street. We want to provide that straight through to the pedestrian underpass that's being provided at Drumpelia. Initial indications suggest that Isodune will probably end up becoming some form of public open space corridor, given there's a significant amount of services that currently exist in that area. But just do need to stress that we haven't actually done a formal planning exercise on that yet, but have looked at that indicatively, and importantly to make sure that it seamlessly integrates with this LSP3 that we're looking at now.
Oh, sorry, what do you mean by public open space corridor? Don't know what you mean by that.
We'll need to be providing public open space within that area as well, again in accordance with livable neighbourhoods, and part of that we might look at a linkage for Isodune, which is going to be closed.
Isodune, where's that going to be closed?
When or where?
Where?
I believe it's where it's connecting to Yaldine Road.
Yeah,
but sorry, I don't have the detail on that.
I was talking about down at,
further down
at
south.
Harrow.
I believe that
have you had discussions for it being closed off down at Harrow, and then basically the whole lot just going over to as part of this Brabham 3 ultimately?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So the bit
have
that
you had discussions about that?
Not that I've been involved with. No, all I know is that LSP3 will link down and connect with the southern portion of Isodune Street. And that's provisions made for that within the structure plan. But regarding the balance, I'm sorry, I can't. Yeah, can't
so
comment.
Then you mean that Isodune then would stay open?
The bit that exists right down to the very south, that's outside the structure plan area. I don't believe there's any intention to close that. But yeah, we haven't looked at that any further, and we don't own that land at the moment.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'll ask again, councillors, are there any further questions of Mr. Jarvis? If not, we will move on to Mr. Morgan's deputation. It's gone to? That was combined? We're happy?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you all for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. And you'll find that we have a written deputation from Mr. Phil Cloran, not in support of the officer's recommendation. He's the secretary for the Blackadder Woodbridge Catchment Group. So then we move on to 15.1, Councillor Bowman, Massara Avenue and Henley Brook Avenue intersection review. And we have a written deputation provided from Mr. Greg Van Rompuy in support of the notice of motion. And that brings us to 15.2. Councillor Howlett's Our Friendly Principles and Practices within the City of Swan on page 340. And we have in-person deputations first with Mr. Richard James, not in support, in support of the notice of motion. Thank you, Richard. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be the best deputation this evening. I'm going to be brief. But we know the science and the sequence of events because we've all done it, and possibly some of us still do it. We hear a rustling in the loft, we throw up some mouse baits, the mouse eats them, the mouse goes outside, the owl eats the mouse, the owl dies. So what we need to do is educate us better as to what is the best process to utilise to rid ourselves of vermin, of rats and mice, but in doing so prevent any ongoing deaths to other fauna, such as the owls. So I fully support Councillor Howlett's motion to get the City of Swan to do more to educate us, the ratepayers, as to what we should do and how we should do it. So if I've got any time left, please allow the other speakers a little bit of leeway. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Janes. Councillors, are there any questions for Mr. Janes? Councillor Bowman. Oh, you're not quite finished yet.
Thank you, Richard. You talk about educate. Do you think that's a state government issue, and so it gets done the same across the state, or do you think individual local governments, some do, some don't, giving different messages is a better way of doing it?
Well, the local governments, such as the Augusta, Margaret River, LGA and Fremantle, Mundaring, they're using their best practices to get through to their ratepayers. All too often, if we leave it to the larger bodies in the state government, and I'm not saying that they don't have a role, but I think it's better that the local governments take a role and a leadership role in providing us with education. Thank you.
Any further questions? Any other questions for Mr. Janes? Right, thank you very much for that deputation. And move on to number 2, Mr. Stuart Payne, in support of the notice of motion. Thank you, Stuart, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Or a little extra.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and Councillor Howard for actually bringing this up. I, with my wife, we run the WA Conservation of Raptors. We look after them sick and injured. And we have noticed in the last 31 years that we've been doing it, that the rate of poisonings and the amount of poison and the different types of poison that have occurred in both the City of Stirling and most other shires that we pick up birds from. We don't only pick up birds from the City of Swan, we pick them up from the Shire of Greenough and we go through to Eucla. Now, most of the poisons that are used in the City of Swan, like they are in other shires, bromidolene, brodifacoum, difacom, diphenthylone, focamafin, and pindone. Pindone is used by both shires in a water-based and an oil-based system. In 1996, the City of Cambridge used pindone to put down to get rid of rodents and rabbits. In 1997, we took in 26 birds of prey from the City of Cambridge. It took it 11 years to get its bird of prey population back. This destroys all animals. It is worse than deforestation. Our owls in this neighbourhood have been driven to a serious point where habitat trees are now being knocked over just for the sake of knocking over them to put up a house. And the argument is the tree would have died anyway. It doesn't have to be that way. Owls are now moving, as with other small raptors, are moving to city areas because we now put up convenient buildings of similar heights and we can actually build nests in them. Residents don't like it. Birds of prey are messy, extremely messy. They're worse than ducks. If you know what a duck does, a bird of prey does quickly. Birds of prey only take sick, injured and unaware. A poisoned rat or a mouse can wander up to 70 metres from the initial taking of the bait. Now, it takes, with Brodifacoum, common name, talon, it's used extensively in agriculture. It has been witnessed in a program called Silent Wings by John Young. It takes 5 days for an owl to die. If it is at this time of the year, everything is nesting. We have one saving grace with Proteophocum, it breaks down with water. If you put it in a dry area, it's a very toxic substance. The mouse takes 4 days to die. And in fact, once its organs are broken down and it can no longer eat, that's what it is. It becomes very unaware and very sick and very prone to attacks from owls and the other smaller birds of prey that we have in the area, hence kestrels and black-shouldered kites. They're all cyclical, but we need to get an education system within the cities that we can only use certain products. Second generation ones that don't have the active ingredients of the triple Cs.
Can
the
I ask if
proteophocons.
you have much more there, or
Half a second. We've just got to get hold of the cities to maintain a safer product to use to save our animals. Thank you.
thank you very much. I'll ask councillors, does anyone have a question for Mr Payne? Oh, I think it was very clear, but thank you very much, Mr Payne, for that deputation. I'll ask Ms Poppy Mahan in support of the notice of motion if she'd like to speak. Hello, Poppy, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the council today. My name's Poppy Main and I'm 14 years old. When I was 11, I set up Youth Action for Wildlife after a trip out with Boyd Wykes, a conservationist from our friendly Margaret River, to see the marst owls in their natural habitat. I learnt from Boyd about the immense tragedy occurring in Australia, the deaths of non-target animals including owls, eagles, possums, quenders and pets due to SGARs. I'm constantly hearing about the avoidable deaths of all these non-target animals. I've had the opportunity to see these birds, and it's not until you see them with their chicks you really understand what's at stake. My first ever experience watching these owls was during the school holidays of 2021, when I saw a male and female bringing food back to their chicks. Barely 3 weeks later, the male was found dead on the side of the road, and the cause was secondary poisoning. This event left a lasting impression on me, and this is why I spend my spare time trying to educate people on the dangers of SGARs. I've now spent the last 3.5 years campaigning. I campaign and do not understand why, with all the evidence here in Australia and with so many countries applying restrictions, are we continuing to allow the use of these rodenticides. If the government is not willing to move the APVMA review forward, which has now been in the motions for 18 years, even after a meeting last month with scientists presenting all the evidence, we need to demonstrate through our actions that we will not use these products which are responsible for the deaths of so many animals. We need to send a message to the government that we are not prepared to continue actively and in most cases unwillingly harming these animals by using these products due to lack of knowledge. SGARs represent the bulk of products available for use without restriction and can be found at supermarkets and hardware stores. They always say kill in one feed and have a long half-life unlike first generation, which means they remain in the rodent and are not excreted before death. So, the animal that eats the rodent will also be poisoned as they're basically eating a bait block. Some raptors don't die straight away though, but become drowsy and fly low, increasing their chances of being hit by a car. There's a massive evidence in Australia. A study in 2018 found SGARs in 70% of boobook owls, and now, in 2024, 91% of brush-tailed possums, 91% of dugeites and 60% of bobtails, as well as 33% of banjo frogs had toxic SGAR levels. As you can see, it's not just through secondary poisoning. These poisons are everywhere. Some animals mistake them for food and it's likely that they are contaminating our water supplies. By increasing public awareness through education, we can reduce SGAR usage in our suburbs and retailers are more likely to provide alternatives. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my deposition. I hope you'll consider becoming owl-friendly and educating your community. This is not a hard thing to do. It's not hard to educate people, but it is hard to watch all these animals being killed. You have the power to change this for us, for future generations to wake up every day and see these beautiful animals. Without you, there's no hope for us at all. 86 Australian species are currently sitting on the critically endangered list, and once they're gone forever, such as the barking owl, which is now extinct in southwest WA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Poppy, for sharing that deputation, but also raising our awareness. I'll ask, is there any questions from councillors? Councillor Howlett.
Thank you, Poppy. You're inspirational.
Thank you.
And it's your future, it's your generation that will be inheriting what we leave behind. I'm not going to be here for terribly much longer. I hope till next Wednesday at least to get this motion through. But essentially, you know, I can change my practices, but I suppose it's a collective change that really brings the big change. Just reflecting on Councillor Bowman's motion, question earlier, and with what you've said, do you think that the movement that seems to be occurring in local governments by adopting individually this change to their rodenticide, do you think that will send a message to the state government that the community are supportive of change and are keen to see alternatives used?
Well, I hope so, because even if you just change practices in one council, it's going to have a lasting impact on the wildlife there. And if lots of councils start doing it, then it's highly likely that the state government will listen to us. But even if they don't, it's still a worthwhile step in, you know, saving these creatures.
Thank you so much.
Councillors, does anyone else have a question for Poppy? If not, thank you very, very much for that deputation. Thank you very much to the members of the gallery, for everyone tonight for the deputations. I wish you a safe trip home if you are leaving the gallery now. We'll move on to 6.3, councillor questions to staff in regard to the items on the agenda. Councillor Howlett.
Thank you. Where's my questions? Oh, okay. So in relation to 14.3.5, which is the John Street motion, can the 20 submissions that were received by the city please be circulated to all councillors so we can see what the residents have to say?
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Yes, yep, we can have them circulated.
Thanks. And I've got one further question, which relates to 14.3.4, Rose Hill. In the written deputation by Steve Boswell, he says the original approval for rezoning explicitly excluded the use the developers are seeking. I'm just wondering if that statement is correct.
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the item in front of us is an amendment to add several uses to this precinct, so that is correct.
Councillor Dawn.
Thanks very much. Just in regards to item 14.3.6, Brabham Stage 3, I've got a couple of questions, a few. The ecological linkages 32 as a state government, Walga, and City of Swan initiative dating back to 2003, as mentioned by Jan Zek, which is based on scientific knowledge. It's such an important and critical component to the survival of the fauna living within Bush Forever site that I asked the staff, why isn't the ecological linkage 32 mentioned in the agenda or within the office's recommendation?
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, it's an indisputable fact when you look at the plans in front of you that the notion of an ecological corridor in an east and west fashion between the Swan Valley land and Whiteman Park is indelibly separated by the twofold Drumpelia Drive and the alignment of the Morley-Allenbrook rail line. So that is a permanent and irrefutable severance. Now the planning for the Albion District structure plan and the Swan urban or sub-regional urban corridor subsequently was developed up for the most part, post 2003. So you could say that the decisions in relation to the framework for the urban growth corridor, inclusive of the Albion District structure plan, to some extent sacrificed the notion of those uninterrupted east-west linkages.
Thank you. Question 2. Brabham Stage 3 consultants say that they are protecting 4.35 hectares of Banksia woodlands and Public Open Space 5 as protected under federal law as a threatened ecological community, but they fail to mention that the other 3.16 hectares of Banksia woodland, deemed in very good condition, being bulldozed despite the Banksia being protected under the same law. Can I ask Pete or the staff, ask the staff why this is?
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The report goes in some detail to outline what the EPBC approval is that's been granted to the Department of Housing as the owner of the land. And that's threefold. That is to protect within the development site, the land itself, a certain quantum of black cockatoo habitat. It's also requiring them to revegetate effectively the land that is between the future Henley Brook Avenue extension and the eastern boundary of the site, and to revegetate that to a certain standard. It also requires the proponent to provide an offset by way of land acquisition in two sites, one in the Avon Valley and one at Magumba. I think from recollection to the tune of some 360 hectares. So the combination of those three elements are the elements that have satisfied the Commonwealth Environmental Agency with respect to the Banksia woodland and the black cockatoo habitat.
I've just got a couple more questions. Can the species of landscape planting be reconsidered as noted in the LSP boundary to avoid weed species and to avoid the black cockatoo deaths from cars, with black cockatoo foraging instincts being too close to the boundary line as the biggest threat, as mentioned by Jan Zek in her deputation?
Madam Mayor, very simply, yes, we will have control and can suggest appropriate species in streets and at the interface with the Bush Forever site that is neither invasive or might pose a threat, I suppose, if we're talking about trees in the verge that might attract black cockatoos and cause accidents with them. All of that can be managed, yes.
And just lastly, could Council request an assessment of the existing flora and fauna of the Bush Forever 200 as managed by DPLH, Department of Parks, Land and Heritage?
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if the Council sees fit to add any recommendation on the structure plan, that the appropriate agency, that's the department themselves, go in and update and do well, let me preface that. There is nothing to suggest that they don't know themselves the condition and state of the Bush Forever 200, given they're the managing agency, despite what Ms Zek said about trying to access information. But yes, the Council can make a resolution to do a more recent study if one hasn't been done on the condition of the Bush Forever if it sees fit.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. Mr. Russell, 14.3.6 DBCA sent some correspondence to the city on June the 5th. Can we have a copy of that, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, yes, we can provide that to councillors.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Bowman.
Thanks. I'll change subject a little bit first and go to 14.1.2, page 15 of the agenda. A comment was received in the review period about whether it could be reported annually through the audit committee, and the city's response was it's already require important major land transactions. Councillors, you'll note the response to my question 4, which was what is considered a major land transaction, was $10 million. To the officers, my question 5, can I get the rest of the answer to that one? So I've asked for in the last 3 years what property investments that would be captured by this policy were major land transactions, got that part, and were not. So obviously I'm talking up to the $10 million one. And the second part of the question is, how hard would it be to provide a report annually through the audit committee? Because my understanding would be we'd have to capture this data already. So that's my question on 14.1.2.
Through you, Mr. Travascus.
Through the chair, so I guess on major land transactions, the only major land transactions are those associated with the Midland Oval redevelopment master plan, so new junction. So any of the land transactions to that fall into the major land transaction. Certainly, as far as an annual report, we do an annual report on for the term deposit investments. So we could do similar for property investments.
So the answer to my other question, part of the question, was how many property investments we had in the last 3 years up to the $10 million mark. So obviously not a major land transaction that would be covered by this policy.
Through you, Mr. Vasquez.
Oh, to get the exact, through the chair, to get the exact figure, I'll have to take that on notice, but it'll be all land transactions are covered by that policy.
Thank you.
That commercial ones, sorry.
Okay. My next question is on 14.3.5, and it's following on trying to understand the approval process for these 6 dwellings. And you'll notice the questions I've asked as well, where I asked how many properties like this in Midland have 6 or 7 bedrooms, and I asked about the car parking. Are we able to restrict car parking use for this private psychiatric hostel so there's no residents parking? And the reason I ask is because in the application it said that none of them use one.
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, you can.
Okay. My next question is on 14.4.3, which is the Club Nights Light program. And I asked the question about the Swan District Baseball Club because my understanding it was in a bit of trouble only a year ago and was looking at moving. Staff have provided me that there's total members currently 61. That figure, did that come from the club or from historical information that the city had?
Through you, Mr. Bishop.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd have to take that on notice. I haven't provided the answer to that question, but I would imagine it's come from the club development team.
And then my follow-up question is obviously with competing demands of budget, do we have a policy or any process that we look at 1, value for money, and 2, return on investment? Obviously, a baseball requires 300 lux lighting, which is pretty well the highest we put anywhere, with only 61 members, as opposed to other clubs, whether it's baseball or something else, that can't even actually use their facilities at night time, that may have 400 members.
Mr. Bishop, would that be your department? Or through to Mr. Ross? Oh, no, through Mr. Jacqueline.
Mr. Jacqueline, are you able to talk it through that
Yep.
issue? Smiling.
Yeah,
there
thank you for that. Thank you for that, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so the ones that we put forward there, the reason why they're up for renewal, up for the grant funding is because they require renewal. And when we renew the lights, we look at our standards of provisions, and that requires a certain lux lighting as per the Australian standards. So the ones that you're looking at here are the ones that are identified from the renewal process. But we do consider the number of users and groups that use those facilities as well. But the reason why you're seeing the ones put forward there is from a renewal perspective.
So it's sort of like build it and they'll come. With 14.4.2, so we're giving up land that's purpose is public recreation for a road. So am I right in my understanding, because the response was a little bit unclear in my mind, that the community as a whole is going to lose some land that is currently purpose is public recreation?
Through you, Mr. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the city doesn't own that land. Then that land is owned by the Crown. So the city has there is the drainage component of that. So because the city doesn't own the land, I guess the city isn't losing that portion. And in terms of public open space as well, then that would be provided in other areas. So when the developer develops that structure plan, there would be areas that are allocated for the public open space. So they would be meeting the minimum requirements through there.
Yep. So, but my question was, with this motion, is the community losing more public recreation area, because obviously the development would have already had the public open space amount and that would have been sorted. This land here is currently public recreation, but now wanting to turn it into a road. I suppose I could play cricket on it still, but am I right in that it's going to be less public recreation land because of this motion?
Mr. Jacquarino.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the structure plan has showed that as a road which has been endorsed. The city has no plans of creating that into public open space. So I guess the motion, or I guess the purpose of this report, is to put it to the correct land use, which is to provide a road in that area.
My next one, moving on to, I've got quite a few, 14.3.6. The report noticed that the Dampier to Bunbury Natural Gas Pipeline Management Group didn't respond. Are we concerned that we've got no response there, considering we heard, potential gas explosions and everything?
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not unduly, there is ample opportunity in subsequent, particularly subdivision stage, where those agencies make it very clear, and their standards or requirements are just that, fairly standard, well known, and those get communicated quite clearly through the detailed subdivision stage. So no, I'm not particularly worried that they haven't made comment on this plan.
On page 109 of the report, it talks about the road, the vehicles per day along the western section of Yuildene Avenue will be 17,000. Am I correct that 15,000 is the trigger mark for dualling a road, and that was the reason why Nangara started getting dualled?
Through you, Mr. Jacquarino.
For you, Madam Mayor, 15,000 is the typical standard, but each road and each situation needs to be assessed on its own credit.
So with the traffic impact assessment consultant's report saying it's going to be 17,000, will the city be required to spend a lot of money on dualling in future years Yuildene Avenue as an outcome of this development?
Through you, Mr. Jacquarino.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So it's not uncommon for some roads to be just above the 15,000. So if you're talking 17,000 is predominantly the amount through there, then that could be acceptable to keep as a single carriageway. It's when you're approaching the 15,000 and there's going to be continuous growth, potentially, yes, then you would have to look at duplicating that in the future.
Just out of interest for comparisons, what does Millhouse Road currently carry on average in an average location?
Through Madam Mayor, I'll have to take that one on notice to give you the exact number for that one.
Okay. The next one is reference to page 110, and we're talking about the number of intersections. And it came back and said it was excessive. This is the Department of Planning, Land and Heritage, the Infrastructure Corridor team, where I think we got told the name has changed and it should be reduced. But the next paragraph said that city staff are satisfied that the proposed number of intersections can operate within acceptable levels. How do we determine that staff are satisfied?
Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll take that because I wrote that. The comments from the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage Transport branch are looking at the basic philosophical tenet or functional arrangement of blue roads, other regional roads, to have a primary transport function. And that generally means that you want to have the minimum amount of cross traffic through certainly avoiding crossovers to dwellings and to minimise the numbers of street intersections onto those roads. Now, the peculiar bit, I suppose, about this is a other regional road, as our staff are well aware, it's a very short stretch between two roads, between Drumpalia and any future Henley Brook Avenue extension. So in this instance here, and also noting that this development by the state is seeking to, quite understandably, leverage the maximum amount of utility from its proximity and access to the Morley-Allenbrook train line. And that, as it is imperative that the design in relation to the land abutting Yuildene Road fits in the town centre and fits in sufficient high density residential to leverage off the proximity both to the town centre and to the train station. So inevitably, from a traffic management point of view and an access point of view, that's going to require some road connections. So whilst in theory it goes against the classical grain of minimising the numbers of road intersections onto a blue other regional road, in reality, given the need of what the structure plan is trying to deliver within the context, it is considered to be reasonable.
I might have to listen to that one back on the replay tomorrow morning. Thanks for that. But the public open space, and my pet one is usable public open space. There seems to be a lot of public open space in this application that I would deem is not really usable. The drainage basins are going to be full quite a lot, and there's significant amount of bush, trees, whatever. Is this amount of normal usable public open space about the same as what other areas are, or is the usable public open space a bit less than what is normally usable public open space? Hope I haven't confused you on that one.
A little bit. But,
Sorry.
through you, Mr. Russell.
No confusion, Madam Mayor. It's a very good question. Simply put, I think the report states that the amount of creditable public open space, that is public open space that doesn't have drainage basins accommodating certain type storm events, to be creditable is about 13%. Back in the day, before it became acknowledged as best planning practice to integrate through stormwater into public open space, as we know, we had sumps, drainage sumps, the classical sumps with the cyclone mesh around them. What you've found since it's become adopted as best practice over the last 20 or plus years in town planning design is with the integration of drainage, you start to actually have more public open space than the mere 10%, which has been around as the standard of provision since about 1955. So this one has got more than the 10% creditable open space, and in every instance within the Swan Urban Growth Corridor, all structure plans have delivered more than 10% POS for that reason, predominantly because of the integration of drainage functions into public open space.
The proposed school site, the Department of Education suggests it should be increased from 4 hectares to 4.25 hectares, so then a future daycare could go on it. Would that not be a better planning outcome? So therefore, any future buyers who buy residential properties don't then find out 2 years later that 2 or 3 blocks next to them are being bought up by a daycare provider to build a daycare, i.e. it's back in the old days where you knew where the churches were going to be, you knew where other certain things were going to be. Wouldn't this give certainty to those people who were future residents?
It may give certainty to them, but again, that's not the way planning has gone. Planning has become the promotion of mixed-use activities rather than spatially segregated activities for the purpose of the land use and transport nexus to reduce multiple vehicle trips going from one land use to the other. It certainly would give some certainty, but look, what the report says is that the operational policy talks about bumping up a primary school site above 4 hectares if there is no other opportunity to provide a childcare facility in the surrounding area. Now, there's a couple of things in relation to that. One of the best practice arrangements is to have the childcare facilities often located in the town centre. So there's an opportunity for that to occur. Certainly in the surrounding residential areas, our scheme permits childcare premises to be developed in residential areas, though I take the point that people are often, as we well know here, from the applications that come to council, people do often get disturbed or upset to some extent to understand that a childcare has moved next door, or there's an application for childcare that's been developed next door to them. So yes, you could do that, but what we've said in relation to the operational policy is there's no need to have this primary school site increased in size by 2,500 square metres to accommodate childcare when there is ample opportunity in appropriate locations surrounding this primary school site.
The report talks about the secondary school site can be 8 hectares because it'll be located with a budding district open space with a shared use arrangement. What shared use arrangements have we currently got with any high schools in the City of Swan?
Through you, Mr. Russell? Or through you, Mr. Giacomino?
Through Madam Mayor, then I can take that one on notice and reply back to Councillor Bowman.
Thank you.
Could the ultimate one, the shared use, is the Ellenbrook Secondary College, where we have shared use of the library that sits there. Now, if you're asking the question about public open space, we do have shared use facilities across many of our primary schools, but we'll come back, but specific on the public open space aspect.
I couldn't think of any shared use agreements for ovals with high schools in the City of Swan. At page 117, this retention of threatened priority flora, Verticordia lindii. Okay. Staff note that a small pocket park could be created in an essential portion of the site for the purpose of retention of these plants. So a POS would be retention of the plants. Does that mean we're going to fence the POS, and would that then become non-usable POS? Or are we just hoping that no one will trample on them?
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a fair question. Look, I would imagine for it to be usable POS, you'd want to have it open. Otherwise, it's not POS. It would come down to the detailed design as to how you would integrate that priority flora into the design of the public open space so that it was there without fencing off the POS entirely.
On page 121 is probably the best map. That's parcel of land that we've been talking about. I forget what the lot number is, between Drumpellier and Isodone, or Isodon. Was having an argument about that the other day. With it actually previously being parkland or recreational land, and now the state government wanting to build on it, would it not be a better planning outcome to actually consider it all together? So I asked the question of Pete about the interface. They're trying to do the interface on the likelihood that they might get the land. Is there any options available for a better planning outcome to consider it all at once?
To you, Mr. van der Linde.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. I'm aware that the developer and the government tried to facilitate a plan that looked at it all at the same time. That was impacted by various things. It was the design of the train station initially. Then Watercorp came along and were looking at part of that area for a future water pipeline that impacted the time frames. And at the end, Pete didn't have an agreement with government to deal on that land. So the timing of various things didn't work out, and on that basis, they couldn't submit a structure plan that entailed the whole area. So if you look at the environmental assessment and management strategy that was circulated as a separate attachment on, and that I think it's numbered page 182 on the agenda, there's a development concept plan for the whole area that Pete has worked on with Metronet at the time when they looked at the station, and that gives an indication of what could happen on that land. So they've tried to integrate the whole thing, but it just didn't work out from a timing perspective for various things that happened out of their control.
Page 135 is the next.
Sorry, Councillor Bowman, I just want to ask how many more questions you have and whether we might break it up, give some of the other councillors a chance, and then we can come back again.
Oh, it depends.
How many more?
Depends how many more highlights I've got. I haven't got them written down. I'll finish with 3.
All right. I'm just going to swap and just go to Councillor Dawn for a moment. Just let the other councillors have a few, and then we'll come back. Okay, Councillor Dawn.
Thanks very much. Just in relation to what Harry Gratt had said, is that a real possibility to expand on Yuildene as a dual carriageway as opposed to the Henley Brook Road extension? Could that be a real possibility to consider?
Thank you, Mr. van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, if we look at the scenarios that were modelled for Henley Brook Avenue, I think our engineers have looked at 4 scenarios which councillors were briefed on earlier on in the year. Those scenarios, one of those scenarios included not constructing Henley Brook Avenue south of Yuildene, and identified what the impact would be in that scenario. So it is a scenario that has been modelled, but and then if you remember the outcome of the comparison between those models indicated that on the long term it will be best to have Henley Brook Avenue constructed, considering all the impacts on the other roads. So it is a possibility, but it certainly will have impacts on various other things, not only the road network, but the whole of the development concept of the Urban Growth Corridor. And if you do that, you will have to remodel the traffic to determine what Yuildene Road will have to look at that stage, and what the implication, for instance, will be on West Swan Road, and the implications of that then on the tourist businesses in that area.
Great. Can we do that?
That was done with those scenarios.
Did you have a further question? No. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. My first question is about 14.3.5. This is the John Street Psychiatric Hostel development application. May I ask if the CEO could provide us, and I guess he'll need to take this on notice, information about any complaints about the Honeybrook Hostel from the residents of John Street? As I know there are complaints. Could we get that information? Because that'll be a good indicator of the likely impact of the new hostel.
Can I, through the chair, just confirm what type of complaints?
Well, I received complaints myself about just antisocial behaviour. Yeah, smoke drift, that kind of thing. I received a lot myself and sent them on, but it'd be good to get it all summarised.
Thank you. To the chair, we'll have a look to see what we might have on the records.
Okay, thanks. And my next question is about 14.3.6, which is the structure plan. I'm looking at page 170 in the agenda report, which is figure 8, opportunities and constraints plan. And my question is just to make sure I really understand this context. So this section of land which is marked in green north of Harrow Street and south of the structure plan area, which I think I've been looking on Swan Interim Maps is lot 801. Is that bush forever? I guess through you, Madam Mayor, to planning staff.
Planning staff are nodding and saying yes, but
That's right, yeah, I thought it was. And is that, do we have any information about the quality of that bush forever flora and fauna?
I'll ask through you, Mr. Russell.
Yeah, there's some historic studies, but I think, as one of the councillors had previously asked, is it possible to find out what the present condition is? We can inquire with the DPLH as to, they might share this with us, what their last inspection or management regime is and what their report on the condition of the Bush Forever Reserve is. They can either give us the information if they have it or summarise it, or can choose to not provide that if they haven't got it, but we can inquire, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No worries. Now, are there any other questions from other councillors? Councillor Henderson?
Just picking up on Councillor Dawn's question about the road modelling for Henley Brook Ave down to Yuldine. We received that report, of course, but there was some conjecture or disagreement from Mr. Humphrey Bogart of the Ratepayers Association, suggesting that it was inaccurate because certain roads were missed out. Did we ever look at fully reviewing that and including the road networks that had been missed out?
Mr. Van der Lind might be able to assist, or Mr. Jacquarina.
For you, Madam Mayor, then I can answer that one. Yes, city staff are working on reviewing that model with those roads added, and once that's reviewed, there will be a further briefing to council.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, Councillor Henderson? Councillors, before I go back to Councillor Bowman, are there any other questions for staff? Councillor Catalano?
Just with the Midland psychiatric, or that facility that they're trying to, I'm just a bit confused because Honeybrook Lodge or hostel, he said was a group dwelling, and yet, and then they said that the new facility was going to be single flats because people were going to basically be educated to get back to be independent. But then somebody else has now said that there's 6 rooms in each of these. Does anyone actually know? Because it's not clear. Couldn't find it was clear in that report that was there as to whether these are going to be individual flats or whether they are actually group dwellings.
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When the application was made by Roshana originally, they had a proposal for 6 group dwellings. And a group dwelling is a unit that sits on a title with common property, commonly a strata title. So that's so they're detached, separate detached units with a common property driveway. You know, it's not uncommon, I suppose. I mean, it might be a little bit, well, actually, let me rephrase it. It may well be slightly uncommon to have units with that many numbers of bedrooms, but it's not impermissible. What the proponents have done, and the reason why it probably deserves some explanation, we've said that they needed a change of use. And we've said it's no longer group dwellings or aged independent persons, is the nature of the relationship between the facility being managed by a single entity in Roshana with the presence of staff in a care facility. And we say that disqualified the proposals from being aged or dependent persons dwellings. So that's why we've taken that position. It is, that type of use is still permissible, but certainly we've said to have the facility operated with staff on site providing a permanent care arrangements goes beyond what you would normally provide for under a group dwelling arrangement or even an aged independent person's dwelling.
Isn't that what's happening at Honeybrook Lodge?
I can't speak, through you, Madam Mayor, I can't speak as to I'd have to go back and have a look at what approvals, if any, Honeybrook Lodge has got. It may well be that they're operating as group dwellings. Or have a
Is-
group
or is
dwelling
it,
approval.
Or is it one big group dwelling? Honeybrook Lodge is one big group dwelling, and these are 6 separate group dwellings.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I would, for clarity and precision, I'll go and check
And so
the
you're saying
record.
that if you have 6 separate group dwellings, that is not permissible under the planning for dependent and aged people. Is that what you're saying?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'll have to hear that again. I didn't quite
Okay.
gather that.
So Honeybrook Lodge is for dependent and aged people.
It could be. I'll need to check.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not sure, and you've just gave us this long explanation that, sorry, I didn't understand it. That's
No,
why
it's
I'm
not.
asking questions. So if we could just have it
Perfectly
sort of
fine.
clear.
Yep.
We've got 6 dwellings, group dwellings, because there's 6 to 9 bedrooms or something. Quite a lot of bedrooms in each of these units. There's 6 of these units. They're still going to be for aged and dependent. So why do they need to come and ask for this approval?
Because in this instance, whilst the people may well be dependent persons in characterisation,
Yes.
the simple fact is that they are living within a complex managed by a single entity with the presence, in addition to, with the presence of staff on site.
And Honeybrook Lodge doesn't have staff on site?
I can't speak to that, Madam Mayor. As I said, I would need to check the approvals.
So then I just don't understand why then for this 6 group dwellings, you'd have to have a separate approval process or a separate kind of special approval for that when you've got it, when they've already got it for the Honeybrook Lodge, which is effectively a group dwelling with staff on site as well.
If you're asking me to postulate, I'll postulate this. It could be they're occupying that facility, exactly like they're proposing here, under a group dwelling approval.
And that wouldn't be something that staff would consider is
Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if we've formed the view that a similar operation to what is proposed here is occurring at Honeybrook Lodge under the auspices of a group dwelling development, well, that may well be not consistent with the group dwelling terms of approval.
we might need to get that cleared up then
And
before next
Madam
week.
Mayor, that's why
I've
I've
already
said
mentioned that you will do
I
a
will
site
be
visit
looking
for
at
us,
it.
thank you, and provide those
okay,
details back,
great,
which
thank
will
you.
be
Thank
pretty much
you.
essential to making that decision. Councillor Bowman.
I'll go back to 14.3.6 in a minute, but just one question on the John Street one. What's built there? Are they the same floor plans that got approved in 2019 that are included in the agenda, all 6 buildings? Yep, which show the 6/7 bedrooms. Okay. 14.3.6, page 135. I love it when we get these lovely pictures. How do we actually get some verge and or on-street parking in this development before it's too late? Because normally we always say we'll do it later on, but isn't that one of the biggest problems that we're hearing from residents in Bradman, Averley as well? So is it now or later?
To you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's later because we'll deal with that at detailed subdivision design stage, where we see the disposition of lots, maybe the disposition of public open space. We've got precise details of the road type, road widths, and we'll look at the provision sensibly of on-street parking, which is generally provided, as we know, on the frontages to public open space areas, on the frontages to commercial areas, on the frontages to schools.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman.
Does any local governments do it at this stage?
Through you, Mr. Russell.
It's always difficult for me to speak of other local governments, Madam Mayor. No, it's generally done at detailed subdivision stage, but I mean, as Mr van der Linde's pointed out, you can see some of the nominal road cross sections that do depict for certain types of road the standard provision of on-street parking. So to that extent, yes, it is generally, they'll generally say with these types of roads, it's standard to have on-street parking. The precise location of all of where those go is, as I said, detailed at subdivision stage.
Thank you. Further questions?
My next question is page 142. It's the access egress points from Yuledean. the distance between the two roundabouts, do we know how much that is? And is that likely to cause problems like it does on Millhouse Road?
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I haven't got the distances, but we're satisfied with the spacing of the intersection arrangements.
So a follow-up question, are we satisfied with the spacing distances for Millhouse Road in Allenbrook when we were okay then?
Through you, Mr. Russell.
I can't speak to that, Madam Mayor.
The next one is regarding the wastewater pump station that's there. What sort of wastewater is it? Is it like Millhouse Road where it stinks a kilometre away, or is it just a simple drainage wastewater pump station? So the question is, what sort of wastewater pump station is it?
Through you, Mr. Russell, if you're able to answer.
As in, is it a wastewater pump station that pumps sewer? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Then we go to page 189, and it was interesting because the applicant actually said they couldn't put the senior high school on Yuildene because it had to be further away from a few things, including the pump station, I believe. But a primary school's there. Am I correct in looking at page 189 that the pump station is sort of going to be incorporated with Park 2?
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Yes, that's correct.
And in this park with the aerial themed playground, it's going to be located and designed, I'm reading from page 190, to minimise intrusion of existing wastewater pump station on surrounding residential areas. So am I reading that right as we'll put a park with a few planes or something next to a sewage pumping station, so residents won't complain and kids won't go to the park? Is that sort of...
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Through Madam Mayor, that's one way of putting it. What we would say here is that the public purpose reserve that's got to incorporate this particular type of wastewater infrastructure requires a 50-metre buffer. And one of the matters that we were at pains to confirm with the applicant and the Water Corporation is that the public purpose reserve will be sized sufficient to be able to accommodate the 50-metre separation from the wastewater pump station. So in theory, you'll have the 50-metre buffer wholly contained within the public purpose reserve, and in theory you won't have any potential odour from the wastewater pump station being experienced in the public open space. I'll accept you might say that's a theoretical construct, but from a planning point of view, it's satisfactory.
So with that 50-metre buffer zone, would that be considered public open space and usable?
No, Madam Mayor, as I said, the 50-metre buffer will be within the public purpose reserve for water, not creditable, usable public open space.
And final question, page 192, we look at the high school site and the oval, and obviously the applicant and the documents say we can reduce the high school site to 8 hectares because we're going to have an oval next door that we can integrate. Am I looking at that right, that in between the school site and the oval there's going to be a whole lot of bush area? If that's correct, how does that integrate with the high school site? Because my understanding is when they design these dual purpose facilities, although I haven't seen one in a high school before, that they usually want to be able to see the kids when they're out there kicking the football and that, especially at lunchtime and recess. So am I reading it right, or am I expecting that all that area will end up being car parking?
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, that's a very good question, and it's certainly a point that the Department of Education, its submission to the city raised, and that is how is the treatment, the interface between the high school and the district open space site. The proponent has done up a couple of landscape concepts that endeavour to get that line of sight and access arrangements between the school and the district open space site. There are other concepts that one concept was more open than another concept which had more trees conserved. And of course, so what you're dealing with there is a balance between having a functional arrangement between the high school site and the district open space for all of the points that Councillor Bowman's correctly raised, but also taking opportunity to retain some of the existing Banksia woodland, and some of which might be quite mature, that exist in that part of the land. So that's going to really get down to and it may well be dictated by what the proponent's obligations are to comply with the EPBC approval in terms of retaining Banksia woodland. So like everything, as I was explaining or mentioning to some of the councillors prior to this meeting, planning is inevitably a balance and a balancing act between various competing, sometimes almost mutually exclusive considerations, but finding that right balance, and that's a good one that we'll need to look at in the detailed design.
Thank you. Councillor Miles, you had a question.
Yeah, just really quickly, Madam Mayor, could I please be reminded by staff how our tree retention policy informs the planning, the LSP stage? I just can't remember exactly.
Mr. Jacquina? No, Mr. Van der Linden, thanks.
Madam Mayor, just noting that the tree retention policy is under, we're busy preparing that at the moment, but that will require, when a structure plan is prepared, they will have to do a detailed assessment of the trees on site and have that work done as part of the structure planning process. So for instance, in North Ellenbrook, where they're looking at the new areas, we require them to do those detailed surveys of the trees on site prior to them starting the work, and work from that as a basis. So in this instance, it essentially happened through that EBBC clearing work that was done years ago, or started years ago. So they did investigate the tree retention here, and then at the time when we had the first discussions on the structure plan specifically, we already indicated to them that tree retention is becoming more important and that they have to look at it. And Phil attended more of the meetings, but with our design review panel, that was looked at as well, and there was redesigns done to facilitate retention of more trees through that process as well. I think it went back to them 3 times. So it was informally looked at in this process in a similar way to what the policy would have asked us to do.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from any other councillors who had not? If not, you're welcome to email staff. Oh, sorry, was it? No, microphone off. Thank you to those in the gallery. Thank you to Councillor Howlett.
On the confidential item?
Yes. Do we need to go behind closed doors for that?
It's a confidential item.
Imagine so. Just letting everyone know first. Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Is there anyone? Seconder, Councillor Miles. Anyone against? Okay, we need to just ask staff to say good evening and thank you very much, Mr. Jacquin, and then we will just make sure that the gallery is clear. And for those watching at home, we need to go behind closed doors for a confidential item, and then we will resume and come back online in a short while.
The matter relates to the item.
And for those watching at home, we've just come back from behind closed doors. And thank you for watching tonight. And we will close the meeting at 8:49. Thank you.